Sea. June 1944. While Allied armies were breaking through German defenses in Normandy, on the other side of the world a battle was unfolding that would decide the future of the Pacific Ocean. East of the Philippines, the United States fleet and the Imperial Japanese Navy collided in a colossal engagement, a war of fighters, aircraft carriers, and submarines. Japan launched its last great offensive to stop the invasion of the Mariana Islands. But what followed was an air carnage unlike anything seen before. Hundreds of Japanese aircraft fell from the sky like burning lead. Beneath the waves, submarines silently lurked and sent the pride of the Japanese Navy to the bottom. This is the story of the battle that left Japan without wings, the clash that sealed the fate of the Pacific. By mid-1944, the Pacific Ocean had turned into a deadly chessboard. The pieces were battleships, aircraft carriers, submarines, and thousands of men determined to write history with fire. After years of fighting, the United States had managed to force its way through atolls and reefs, advancing island by island. Now its sights were set on a strategic and symbolic objective, the Mariana Islands. If Saipan, Tinian, and Guam fell, B-29 bombers could take off from there to strike directly at the heart of the Japanese Empire. Tokyo knew this, and it was willing to do anything to stop it.
Much of Japan's pre-war naval air power had been destroyed in the Battle of Midway and the Guadalcanal campaign. Since then, the Imperial Japanese Navy had gradually rebuilt its air groups and carrier fleet with the goal of engaging the Americans in a decisive battle that would end the American advance across the Pacific Ocean. When the United States Fifth Fleet advanced on the Marianas Islands, Japanese naval leaders saw an opportunity to spring their trap.
Faced with the imminent invasion, Japan mobilized its combined fleet, 9 aircraft carriers, 11 battleships, and dozens of escorts. It was a colossal naval force that carried on its decks the last remnants of its carrier-based air power. The plan was simple and desperate. They would try to ambush the U.S. fleet east of the Philippines, annihilate its carriers, and halt the assault on the Marianas in its tracks.
The Japanese Navy's planning for hostilities against the United States was primarily defensive. It was dependent on seizing strategically important islands in order to establish a defensive perimeter. Bases would be constructed on these islands from which Japanese air units would sortie to scout and destroy any approaching American fleet. The Japanese expected these island outposts to wear down the approaching American fleet to the point where the Japanese combined fleet would be able to destroy it in a decisive battle.
But what Japan did not know was that its days of air dominance were over. Facing it stood an American fleet with 15 carriers, 900 aircraft, and technology that changed the rules of the game. Radar, advanced air control, and a new generation of pilots trained specifically for this moment. The stage was set. In the depths of the ocean, submarines were lurking. On the flight decks, the engines of the fighters roared. The sky was about to explode.
En la mañana del 19 de junio de 1944, los japoneses lanzaron sus ataques aéreos contra los navíos estadounidenses. Los radares estadounidenses detectaron la aproximación de los bombarderos japoneses.
Thus, while Tokyo's forces believed they were about to take their enemy by surprise, the sky over the Philippine Sea turned into a deadly trap for them instead. From their carriers, the Imperial Japanese Air Arm took off with determination. Hundreds of bombers and Zero fighters flew toward the U.S. fleet, convinced they would repeat the glories of the past. But what they found was a hell ruled by the F-6F Hellcats. Designed to destroy Japan's legendary fighter, the Hellcats were fast, rugged, and flown by men hardened in earlier battles. And although the Zeros still held the edge in agility for certain maneuvers, the Americans were supported by radar and air control operators. They knew exactly when and from where the enemy attacks were coming. and they were ready for a ruthless hunt. One after another, Japanese aircraft fell wrapped in fire. Some never even caught sight of the enemy fleet.
American Hellcats shoot down over 20 planes from the first attack wave. Naval anti-aircraft fire hit a dozen more.
In just a few hours, more than 300 Japanese planes were shot down. The Hellcats roared across the sky like ravenous beasts. They tore through enemy formations, fired precise bursts, and returned without a scratch. Japanese air superiority, once so feared, was disintegrating before the eyes of the world. For American pilots, it was as easy and as lethal as a hunter shooting at birds in an open field. By the end of the day, the nickname that immortalized the battle was born: the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot.
When a fighter pilot landed on the Lexington during the battle and was asked how the battle went, he replied, "Why, hell, it was just like an old-time turkey shoot back home." The phrase caught on, and the battle became known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot by the Allies.
It had not been a fight, but an aerial execution. Even so, the clash between Americans and Japanese had only just begun. While the sky burned, beneath the silent waters, a new wave of death was taking shape. The USS Kavala, an American submarine, was patrolling east of the Philippines in search of high-value targets. When its operators detected the imposing silhouette of the carrier Shokaku, they knew their moment had come. It was near noon when, from the depths, the Kavala fired 6 torpedoes. 3 of them struck directly along the starboard side of the Japanese giant. The first tore into the aviation fuel tanks. The second hit near the main hangar, where an aircraft had just landed and was being refueled. But the third one lit the fuse of hell. Fuel spilled. Fire spread rapidly. The bombs stored in the hangar began to explode in a chain reaction. The flight deck shook. Men ran through smoke and screams. The captain of the Shokaku, knowing the ship was lost, gave the order to abandon her, but it was already too late. Minutes later, a cataclysmic explosion shook the carrier. Vapor from the volatile fuel blew the hull apart from the inside. The Shokaku broke in two and sank, taking with it more than 1,200 men, including its captain. Through the Kavala's periscope, the submariners watched as one of the symbols of Japanese naval power disappeared beneath the waves. In that lethal scene, the fate of Imperial Japan was being sealed. Nevertheless, despite everything, Tokyo was not yet ready to surrender.
The Japanese were still confident, however, expecting that their large numbers of land-based aircraft around Guam and the other Marianas Islands would play a major role in evening the odds. This, like many of their other assumptions, would come back to haunt them.
Hope vanished completely with a second brutal blow. Almost at the same time as the attack on the Shokaku, another Japanese carrier moved into the crosshairs of American forces. This was the newest and most advanced pride of the Japanese fleet, the Taiho. With reinforced armor and a flight deck capable of withstanding heavy hits, many believed it to be invulnerable. But beneath the waves, the enemy was lying in wait. The American submarine USS Albacore found her and, from a concealed position, fired 6 torpedoes. Only one struck home, but it was enough.
A la media hora de iniciada la batalla, un torpedo lanzado por un submarino estadounidense alcanzaba el portaaviones japonés de mayor envergadura, el Taiho, de cuya cubierta todavía despegaban aviones. La batalla del mar de Filipinas ya se había cobrado su principal víctima.
The torpedo pierced the hull and smashed into an aviation fuel tank. The initial explosion was not fatal, but it left an invisible threat floating inside the ship: gasoline vapors. Instead of evacuating critical areas or shutting down the electrical systems, the crew activated forced ventilation, believing it would clear the gases. It had the opposite effect. The flammable vapors spread throughout the ship like a shroud of death. For hours, the Taiho continued operating, oblivious to the disaster building inside. And then it happened. A single spark, an accidental ignition, caused the entire carrier to explode from within. The hangar was swept by flames, the aircraft detonated one after another, and the decks collapsed in succession. The ship broke apart, burning like a floating torch. More than 1,600 sailors died in the blast or went down with the vessel. The Taiho, which was meant to be the cornerstone of Japan's naval future, became a steel tomb because of a single human error. There was no time for grief, however. The battle continued, and it would rage on for one more day.
A primera hora del día siguiente, las fuerzas estadounidenses buscaron sin descanso la posición exacta del resto de los portaaviones. No los descubrieron hasta última hora de la tarde. Era demasiado tarde para lanzar un ataque, ya que los aviones tendrían que volar al límite de su autonomía. Sin embargo, el comandante del destacamento de fuerzas estadounidense, el almirante Mark Misher, decidió arriesgarse y ordenó el ataque.
While the Hellcats ruled the skies and the submarines hunted in silence, the U.S. fleet kept launching wave after wave of attacks from its carriers. One of their targets was the Hiyo, another of Japan's great colossi. On June 20th, 4 Grumman TBF Avenger torpedo bombers launched from the USS Belleau Wood placed the Hiyo in their sights. From the air, the Avengers dove like hawks. In the middle of anti-aircraft fire and evasive maneuvers, they managed to drop bombs and torpedoes that found their mark. The impact was immediate. One of the bombs punched through the deck and detonated in a compartment where aviation fuel was stored. What followed was one of the most violent explosions of the entire battle. Flames devoured the hangars while black columns of smoke climbed over the ocean. The fire spread quickly, fed by spilled fuel and munitions that began to explode. Control stations were knocked out. Amid the confusion, attempts to contain the blaze failed. The Hiyo, without power, propulsion, or defense, was left at the mercy of its fate, just like all the aircraft that had tried to protect her.
Un tercer portaaviones japonés, el Hiyo, fue alcanzado y hundido. Los japoneses habían perdido más de 300 aviones.
The ship was swallowed by the dark waters of the Pacific. More than 250 men died in the explosion or were trapped beneath the hull. The rest of the crew managed to be rescued by Japanese destroyers, but the Hiyo, like the Shokaku and the Taiho, had already joined the blacklist of fallen carriers of Imperial Japan. In barely 48 hours, 3 colossi had gone under, and with them, the hopes of resisting an offensive that had become unstoppable. The battle was not yet over, but the outcome was clear. What remained of Japanese naval aviation tried to reorganize. The pilots, many of them young men with no combat experience, took off bearing the weight of an impossible mission. Without radar, without escort, and without the advantage they once held, they flew toward their doom. The only thing they carried on board was a will of iron.
This sole fighter dove in, attempting to strike an American destroyer, but was quickly shot down. As futile as this attack was, it does offer a good insight into the mindset of a Japanese pilot during this time, flying into battle no matter the odds and willing to easily give up his own life.
The Hellcats once again rose as executioners in the sky. Every enemy formation that crossed the horizon was detected in advance, intercepted with precision, and torn apart in midair. Some Japanese pilots never even saw the enemy before being hit. The sky turned into a graveyard of shattered wings. By nightfall on the second day, Japan had lost more than 600 aircraft, including most of its carrier pilots. In contrast, the United States had lost fewer than 130 planes, and many of its pilots managed to be rescued after ditching into the sea. The numbers spoke for themselves, but the picture was even more brutal. The Japanese Navy could no longer replace either its men or its machines. The air superiority of the Japanese Empire, which in 1941 had shocked the world with the attack on Pearl Harbor, was officially dead. The Battle of the Philippine Sea was not just a tactical victory. It was an aerial massacre that decapitated Japan's offensive capability. The skies of the Pacific, which had once feared the rising sun, now belonged entirely to the Stars and Stripes.
From this point on, in World War II, the Japanese would never be able to recover the losses of their air groups, with experienced pilots being almost extinct. The aerial war was all but won, and it was, without a doubt, thanks to the Navy Hellcat pilots and their accomplishments in the Marianas Turkey Shoot.
The battle ended with the silence of engines that would never take off again. After destroying Japan's carrier-based air arm and sinking 3 of its main carriers, the United States had not only won another victory at sea, it had bent the course of the war. With the Japanese combined fleet practically blind, without fighters or escorts, the U.S. Fifth Fleet now had open ocean ahead of it. The Mariana Islands were within reach and would be taken one by one, without Japan being able to mount a coordinated defense. Within weeks, airstrips began to appear. Within months, B-29s would be taking off from there toward Tokyo, carrying in their bellies the bombs that would raise entire cities. But this dominance was not only strategic, it was symbolic. The Pacific War, long defined by colossal naval battles, had changed. The aircraft carrier was no longer just a simple combat platform. It was the king of the ocean. And the United States had more of them, better ones, and more powerful ones. Japan, on the other hand, was condemned to fight on the defensive. Without an air fleet or control of the sea, its supply routes stood on the brink of collapse, and its ability to respond was reduced to skirmishes, kamikazes, and desperation. The Battle of the Philippine Sea had been more than a triumph. It was a definitive turning point, the beginning of the end for the Imperial Japanese Navy. In just 2 days, it lost its most valuable carriers, its veteran pilots, and its ability to strike back. From that moment on, the skies belonged to the Americans. The sea was theirs, and the Japanese Empire, beyond its pride, its sacrifice, and its stubborn resistance, could no longer alter the fate that awaited it. All it could do was prepare for the inevitable. And that brings us to the end. If you enjoyed this video, we look forward to having you with us in our next episode as we continue exploring military history.